Chapter 1. The Quiet Before. My name's Daniel Harper, and I was 22, working a dead-end job at the Blackthorn Public Library in Manitoba, Canada, when it all went wrong. It was October 1978, and the air already carried that sharp, wet chill that meant winter was coming. Blackthorn was a small city, maybe 30,000 people, tucked between flat prairies and a sluggish river that froze solid by December. Most of the folks here were Canadian, but I was American, a draft dodger who'd slipped across the border after Vietnam heated up. So were my roommates, Sarah Klein and Tom Ellis, both from Seattle, both running from the same war I was. That afternoon, I was shelving books in the history section, the smell of old paper and dust thick in my nose. The library was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional cough from a patron. Sarah was at the front desk, flipping through a magazine, her dark hair tucked behind her ears. Tom was supposed to be in the archive room, sorting microfiche, but I knew he was probably napping. The day felt normal, lazy even. Outside, the sky was a heavy gray, clouds sagging low like they were tired. A few high school kids were slumped at tables, pretending to study, their voices a low murmur. I remember glancing out the window and seeing a delivery truck pull into the lot across the street, near the Blackthorn Medical Research Institute. It was one of those squat, brutalist buildings that looked like it was built to survive a bomb. The truck was unmarked, which wasn't unusual, but something about the way the driver moved, quick, jerky, like he was nervous, caught my eye. I didn't think much of it then. Just another Tuesday. Then the phone at the desk rang, sharp and loud, cutting through the library's hush. Sarah answered, her voice low, but I could tell something was off by the way her shoulders tensed. She hung up and walked over, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Dan, that was Tom. He says something weird's going on in the archives. Wants us to come down. Weird how? I asked, setting a book back on the shelf. He didn't say. Just sounded freaked out. Her eyes flicked toward the basement stairs, and I noticed her hands were clenched as we headed down, the air getting cooler and damper with each step. The basement smelled like mildew and old glue, and the lights flickered just enough to make you uneasy. Tom was standing by the microfiche reader, his lanky frame hunched, staring at a stack of papers like they'd bitten him. "Look at this," he said, not looking up. His voice was tight, not his usual laid-back drawl. He handed me a folder, its edges yellowed, labeled Project Echelon. It wasn't library material. Looked like something that had been misfiled or hidden. Inside were typed reports, charts, and grainy photos of people in hazmat suits. Words like neural augmentation and containment protocol jumped out. I skimmed a page, subject viability post-exposure, 48 hours. Neural collapse in 80% of cases. My stomach twisted. "Where'd you find this?" I asked. "Behind a loose panel in the storage closet," Tom said. "There's more. Boxes of it. I think it's from the institute across the street." Sarah grabbed the folder, her eyes scanning fast. "This is military. Or something worse. Why's it here?" Before I could answer, the lights flickered again, longer this time, and a low hum vibrated through the floor, like a machine waking up. Then we heard it. A scream, muffled but raw, from outside. Not a kid messing around. It was real, the kind of sound that makes your blood freeze. Chapter 2. The first signs. We ran upstairs, the folder still clutched in Sarah's hands. The library was still quiet, but the atmosphere had shifted, like the air was heavier. A few patrons were at the windows now, staring out at the street. I joined them, my breath fogging the glass. Across the street, near the Research Institute, a small crowd had gathered. A woman was on the ground, thrashing, her coat torn. Two men were trying to hold her down, but she was stronger than she should have been, bucking like an animal. Her eyes were wrong, wide, glassy, darting like they couldn't focus. "Is she drunk?" A kid next to me whispered, his voice shaky. "She's not drunk," Sarah said, her voice low. She was still holding the folder, her knuckles white. Another scream cut through the air, this one closer, from the direction of the library's parking lot. I turned just in time to see a man stumble out from behind a car. His face was slack, mouth hanging open, a string of spit dangling from his chin. He moved like his joints were rusted, each step a jerky lurch. His hands twitched, fingers curling and uncurling like they had a mind of their own. The library doors burst open, and a security guard named Carl rushed in, his face pale, radio crackling. "Everyone stay inside," he shouted. "Lock the doors. Something's wrong out there." "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, stepping toward him. "I don't know," Carl said, his voice breaking. "They're saying it's a chemical spill or something. People are going crazy. Just stay put." I looked back outside. The woman on the ground had stopped moving, but the two men holding her were now stumbling too, their movements starting to mirror hers. A third figure appeared, running full speed toward the crowd, slamming into a bystander so hard they both went down. The sound of the impact carried through the glass, a dull, wet crunch. Tom grabbed my arm. "Dan, we need to get out of here." "And go where?" I hissed. "You heard him. It's spreading." Sarah was flipping through the folder again, her eyes darting. "This isn't a spill. Look at this." She held up a page with a diagram of a brain, arrows pointing to something labeled Echelon trigger. Below it, in red ink, someone had scrawled, "Containment failure risk, 92%. Before we could process it, every phone in the library, every single one, blared at once. A piercing, high-pitched tone, like an air raid siren stuffed into a speaker. My own phone buzzed in my pocket, screen flashing red with a block of text. "Emergency alert. Biohazard incident. Blackthorn region. Seek shelter immediately. Secure all entrances. Avoid contact with exposed individuals. Await further instructions." Chapter 3. Into the basement panic erupted. Patrons screamed, some running for the doors, others freezing where they stood. Carl was yelling into his radio, but all I could hear was static and broken voices. Sarah grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the basement stairs. "We're not staying up here," she said, her voice sharp. Tom followed, still clutching the folder. The basement was darker now, the flickering lights worse than before. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my skin. We crouched behind a row of filing cabinets, trying to make sense of what we'd just seen. "This is connected," Sarah said, tapping the folder. "This Echelon thing. It's not a spill. It's something they made." "Made for what?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper that I skimmed a page from the folder. "Selective neural enhancement for combat applications. Phase 2. Population control protocols." My mouth went dry. They were testing something. On people. Sarah nodded, her face pale. And it got out. A crash echoed from upstairs, followed by more screams. Footsteps, too fast, too heavy, thundered across the floor above. Something slammed against the basement door, hard enough to make the frame rattle. We froze, holding our breath. The door held, but the pounding didn't stop. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like someone, or something, was testing it. "We can't stay here," Tom whispered. "They'll get in." "There's a service tunnel," I said, remembering a map I'd seen when I started working here. "It runs under the library, connects to the maintenance wing of the Institute. It's not on public maps." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's our way out. Or at least somewhere safer." The pounding stopped, replaced by a new sound, clicking, like someone snapping their teeth together, over and over. It was faint but unmistakable, coming from the other side of the door. My skin crawled. I'd heard that sound before, from the man in the parking lot, but we moved fast, grabbing what we could. A flashlight from a supply closet, a crowbar Tom found on a shelf, and a fire axe I yanked off the wall. Sarah stuffed the folder into her backpack. The tunnel entrance was behind a locked steel door in the back of the basement. I fumbled with my staff key, hands shaking, until it clicked open. The air inside smelled like rust and damp concrete, and the tunnel stretched into darkness, narrow and low that we stepped inside. and I pulled the door shut behind us. The clicking faded, but it didn't disappear. It was still there, somewhere above us, waiting. Chapter 4. The tunnel was tighter than I'd expected, barely wide enough for us to walk single file. Pipes lined the walls, dripping with condensation, the plink of water echoing louder than it should have. Sarah led, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark, throwing shadows that made my heart jump every few steps. I was in the middle, the axe heavy in my hands. Tom brought up the rear, muttering curses under his breath. The air was warm, almost sticky, like the tunnel was breathing. Every sound we made, every scuff of our shoes, every ragged breath, felt too loud. "This connects to the Institute, right?" Sarah whispered, her voice bouncing off the walls. "Yeah," I said. "Maintenance access. Should come out near their boiler room." "Then what?" Tom asked. "We just walk into a place that's probably ground zero for this." "You got a better idea?" Sarah snapped that he didn't answer. Neither did I. We kept moving, the tunnel sloping downward, the air getting heavier. Then we heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from ahead. Not the frantic pounding from upstairs, but measured, like someone was pacing. Sarah froze, her flashlight beam shaking slightly. "Turn it off," I hissed. She did, plunging us into darkness. My pulse was so loud I was sure it would give us away. The footsteps stopped, replaced by that clicking again, sharper now, like a tongue snapping against teeth. It was close, maybe 20 feet ahead. I gripped the axe tighter, my palms slick with sweat. Sarah leaned back and whispered, "We can't go back. The library's not safe." "Then we go through," Tom said, his voice barely audible. We waited, holding our breath, until the clicking faded. Sarah flicked the flashlight back on, and we moved faster now, almost running. The tunnel curved, then split into two paths. One was marked with a faded sign, "Boiler Room." The other had no label, just a rusted grate half blocking the entrance. "Which way?" Sarah asked. "Boiler Room," I said. "It's our best shot." We took the left path, the air growing hotter, the smell of oil and metal stronger. The tunnel ended at a steel door, locked with a keypad. Tom swore. "Great. Now what?" Sarah knelt, inspecting the keypad. "It's old. Maybe we can pry it open." I handed her the crowbar, and she wedged it into the panel, grunting as she leaned into it. The metal groaned, then popped open, exposing a mess of wires. "Tom, you're good with this stuff, right?" she asked. He nodded, pulling a pocket knife from his jeans and getting to work. The clicking started again, louder, closer, from the direction we'd come. "Hurry," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm trying." Tom snapped, his hands moving fast. Sparks flew from the wires, and the door clicked, swinging open an inch. We pushed through, stumbling into a dimly lit room filled with humming machinery. The boiler room was huge, pipes snaking across the ceiling, the air thick with heat. We slammed the door shut and wedged the crowbar under the handle. For a moment, it was quiet. Then something heavy slammed into the door from the other side, the impact shaking the frame. The clicking was right there, relentless, like a machine that wouldn't stop. Chapter 5. The Institute. The boiler room was a maze of pipes and gauges, lit by flickering emergency lights that cast long, warped shadows. The air was so hot it felt like breathing soup. We moved deeper, trying to put distance between us and the door. The banging continued, each hit making my teeth clench. "That's not going to hold forever," Tom said, his voice tight. "Then we keep moving," Sarah said, already scanning for an exit. She found a stairwell in the corner, leading up to a heavy door marked Level 1 access. "This has to go into the Institute," she said. "Maybe we can find answers." "Or more of those things," I said, but I followed her anyway. The axe felt heavier now, my arms aching from holding it. The stairwell was narrow, the steps slick with something dark and sticky. I didn't want to think about what it was. At the top, the door was unlocked, swinging open into a long hallway lined with glass-walled labs. The Institute was eerily quiet, The only sound the hum of backup generators. Papers were scattered across the floor, some stained red. A coffee cup lay shattered near a desk, its contents pooling like ink. Sarah knelt by a computer terminal, its screen still glowing. "This is still online," she said, typing fast. "If I can get in, maybe we can figure out what Echelon is." Tom stood guard by the door, his crowbar raised. I paced the hallway, checking the labs. Most were empty, but one had a body slumped against the wall, a man in a lab coat, his throat torn open. His ID badge read Dr. Alan Kessler. I stepped back, my stomach churning. "Dan, get over here," Sarah called. I joined her at the terminal. She'd pulled up a file labeled Echelon Phase 3. It was a video, grainy but clear enough. A man in a hazmat suit was speaking, his voice clipped. Phase 3 trials show neural override in 94% of subjects. Exposure triggers rapid synaptic collapse, followed by motor dysfunction and aggression. Containment protocols are holding, but mutation risks are higher than anticipated. The video cut to footage of a person in a sealed chamber, strapped to a table. Their eyes were wide, darting, just like the people outside. Their mouth opened, and that same clicking sound filled the speakers. I flinched, my skin crawling. "There's more," Sarah said, scrolling. A document appeared, stamped classified. Project Echelon, Neural Reprogramming for Population Control. Target, non-compliant demographics. Delivery method, aerosolized nanites. Nanites? Tom said, looking over her shoulder. "Like tiny robots." "Worse," Sarah said. "They get in your brain. Rewire it. Make you that." The banging from the boiler room stopped, replaced by a new sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway behind us. I spun around, axe raised. The emergency lights flickered, and for a moment, I saw it. A figure in a torn lab coat, moving with that same jerky gait. Its head was tilted, mouth open, teeth clicking. "Run," I whispered. Chapter 6. The chase. We bolted down the hallway, the clicking echoing behind us. The institute was a labyrinth of white walls and locked doors, every turn looking the same. Sarah clutched her backpack, the folder still inside. Tom was ahead, crowbar swinging like a pendulum. I brought up the rear, the axe dragging in my hand, my lungs burning. The figure was gaining, its footsteps louder, faster. It wasn't alone. More clicking joined in, a chorus of snapping teeth from other hallways. "They're tracking us," Sarah gasped, ducking around a corner. "How?" Tom shouted. "Sound," I said, remembering the way the man in the parking lot had sniffed the air. "They're drawn to noise." We skidded into a lab, slamming the door shut. It was a dead end, filled with equipment, microscopes, centrifuges, a glass cabinet labeled biohazard. Sarah shoved a desk against the door, but it wouldn't hold long. The clicking was right outside now, joined by a low, guttural moan that made my blood run cold. Tom was at the cabinet, prying it open with his crowbar. "There's something here," he said, pulling out a metal case. Inside was a single vial, filled with a silvery liquid, labeled Echelon Neutralizer. "Is that a cure?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Maybe," Sarah said, reading the label. "Or maybe it's worse." The door buckled, a fist punching through the wood. A hand reached in, gray and twitching, nails cracked and bloody. I swung the axe, hitting the wrist. The hand jerked back, but the clicking didn't stop. More hands clawed at the door, splintering it. "There's a vent," Tom said, pointing to a grate in the ceiling. "It's our only shot." Sarah climbed onto a table, yanking the grate free. The vent was narrow, but we could fit. She went first, then me, then Tom. The air inside was stale, metallic, and so tight I could barely breathe. We crawled, the metal creaking under our weight. Behind us, the door gave way, and the clicking filled the lab. We kept moving, the vent sloping upward, then down. My elbows scraped raw, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The clicking was fainter now, but it didn't stop. They were still coming. Chapter 7. The neutralizer. The vent spit us out into a storage room, dark and cluttered with crates. The air was cooler here, but it smelled wrong, like chemicals and something rotten. We collapsed onto the floor, panting, covered in sweat and grime. Sarah still held the metal case, her hands trembling. "Is it safe to open?" I asked, eyeing the vial. She shook her head. "I don't know, but we can't just leave it." Tom was at the door, checking the lock. "This room's secure for now, but we need a plan. Those things are everywhere." Sarah opened the case, carefully lifting the vial. The silvery liquid shimmered under the faint emergency lights. "If this is a neutralizer, it might stop the nanites. Or at least slow them down. Or it could make things worse," I said, like the last thing they tested. She ignored me, pulling out the folder and flipping through it. "There's a note here. Neutralizer untested. Risk of cascade failure in infected subjects." "Cascade failure?" Tom asked. "Means it could kill them," Sarah said. "Or us, if we're exposed." The room shook, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What was that?" I asked, gripping the axe. "Military," Tom said, his voice flat. "They're moving in. Probably to torch the place." Sarah closed the case. "Then we take this and get out. If it's the only chance to stop this, we can't let it burn." We found a map on the wall, showing the Institute's layout. A service exit led to the riverbank, a quarter-mile away. It was our best shot, but it meant crossing open ground. "There'll be more of them out there," I said. "Then we move fast," Sarah said, already heading for the door. Chapter 8. The riverbank. The service exit opened onto a loading dock, the river just beyond it, black and sluggish under the overcast sky. The air was cold now, biting through my jacket. Smoke was rising from the city, thick and acrid, curling into the clouds. Sirens wailed in the distance, not rescue but warning, like the world was screaming at itself. We ran, keeping low, sticking to the shadows of the Institute's walls. The riverbank was muddy, slick with frost. Sarah led, the case tucked under her arm. Tom was behind her, crowbar ready. I brought up the rear, axe in hand, my eyes scanning the dark. We were halfway to the river when we saw them. 3 figures, standing motionless on the bank. Their heads were tilted, mouths open, clicking. One was a woman, her dress torn, one shoe missing. Another was a man in a police uniform, his badge glinting in the faint light. The third was a kid, maybe 16, his face blank but his eyes darting. "Don't move," Sarah whispered. We froze, crouching behind a rusted dumpster. The clicking stopped, and the figures turned, their heads snapping toward us. They didn't run, didn't scream, just started walking, slow and deliberate, like they knew we were there. "Go," Tom hissed, shoving Sarah forward. We sprinted, mud sucking at our shoes. The figures broke into a run, faster than I thought possible, their footsteps pounding the ground. The kid was the fastest, his arms flailing but his legs moving like pistons. I swung the axe as he got close, catching him in the shoulder. He stumbled but didn't stop, his mouth snapping open and shut. Sarah reached the river first, slipping on the bank but catching herself. Tom was right behind her, turning to swing his crowbar at the policeman. The hit landed hard, cracking bone, but the man barely flinched. I grabbed Tom's arm and pulled him toward the water. "We can't fight them." We splashed into the river, the cold hitting like a punch. The current was slow but strong, pulling at our legs. The figures stopped at the edge, their heads tilting, clicking louder now. They didn't follow us into the water that we waded downstream, the city burning behind us. The Institute was a silhouette against the flames, its windows glowing red. We didn't stop until we reached a bend in the river, where the bank rose into a thick line of trees. Chapter 9. The forest was dark, the trees so dense they blocked out the sky. We climbed out of the river, soaked and shivering, our breath fogging in the air. Sarah still held the case, her hands shaking but her grip firm. Tom was limping, his face pale, clutching his side. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said. But his voice was weak. We moved deeper into the woods, the ground soft with pine needles. The city's glow was faint now, but the sirens still carried, fainter with each step. We found a hollow beneath a fallen tree and crouched there, catching our breath. Sarah opened the case again, checking the vial. "It's still intact," she said. "But we need to decide what to do with it." "Destroy it," Tom said, wincing as he Saturday. "It's too dangerous." "What if it's the only way to stop this?" Sarah asked. "We don't know what it does." "We know what Echelon does," I said. "It's not worth the risk." She didn't answer, just stared at the vial, her face unreadable. The forest was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then we heard it, clicking, faint but growing louder, coming from the trees. "They followed us," Tom whispered, his voice breaking. That we grabbed our weapons and ran, branches snapping under our feet. The clicking was everywhere now, echoing through the woods. Shapes moved in the dark, just out of sight, too many to count. We didn't stop, didn't look back, just ran until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. That we collapsed in a clearing, the ground hard and cold. The clicking was gone, but the silence was worse. Tom was breathing hard, his face gray. Sarah knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his side. "Tom, let me see." He pulled up his shirt, and we saw it. A bite mark, red and swollen, oozing something dark. "It's nothing," he said, but his voice was shaking. "You're infected," Sarah said, her voice flat. Chapter 10. The choice. We sat in the clearing, the forest pressing in around us. Tom's breathing was ragged now, his eyes starting to dart like the others. Sarah held the vial, her hands steady despite everything. "We can try it," she said. "The neutralizer. It might save him. Or kill him," I said, my voice hoarse. "You read the file." "Cascade failure." Tom laughed, a weak, bitter sound. "I'm dead either way. Might as well roll the dice." Sarah looked at me, waiting for my vote. I didn't want to decide, didn't want to be the one who chose wrong. But I nodded. "Do it." She opened the case, pulling out a syringe from the kit inside. The silvery liquid gleamed as she filled it. Tom held out his arm, his hand shaking. "If this goes bad," he said, "don't let me turn into one of them." Sarah injected him, the needle sinking into his skin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he gasped, his body convulsing, eyes rolling back. Sarah grabbed his shoulders, holding him down. I stood over them, axe raised, ready to swing if I had to. The convulsions stopped. Tom's breathing slowed, his eyes clearing. "I'm okay," he said, his voice weak but steady. "I think it worked." We didn't have time to celebrate. The clicking started again, closer now, surrounding us. Sarah shoved the vial back into the case and zipped her backpack. "We need to move." We ran, the forest a blur of shadows and branches. The lights of a town appeared in the distance, faint but real. We didn't know if it was safe, didn't know if the infection had spread there too. But we kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. The vial was still with us, a tiny piece of hope or destruction, depending on what we did next. We didn't know if Tom was really cured, or if the neutralizer was just delaying the inevitable. We didn't know if the military would find us, or if the world would ever know what happened in Blackthorn. But we were alive, for now. And we had proof, files, a vial, a story no one would believe unless we made them. We kept running, toward the lights, toward whatever came next. The clicking followed us, faint but relentless, a reminder that some things don't stop, not until they're done.